that's right. So most people say, this is my shirt, this is my jumper, and so on. Most of these things aren't worth talking about. Most of the things we see aren't worth talking about. And so not only do we agree on them, we tacitly agree on them. We may or may not. Now you get two debaters, and they'll think they're disagreeing with each other all the time.
Absolutely.
But in actual fact, they agree on most of the time. I've noticed it many times that two debaters come across a third one who joins in the argument, and they suddenly find that they're not on opposite sides at all, but they're correcting the third chap who's joined the group, as it were, and they seem to agree. They don't realise that they agree on so much because they've been arguing. They've only been arguing on that which they disagree on. But when the third chap joins, this third chap sees these two debaters as he wonders what they're talking about. They seem to agree completely with it, like these various Trotskyite sects, and in the old Monty Python film Life of Brian, who are the enemies? Is it Rome? No, it's the we're in the Zionist movement. We're against the Zionist approved movement. That sort of thing.
Sorry, I just want to object to all this about the honour among feasting. I think that's very overstated. I think it's over a romanticising of criminals that we've fallen into. Many years ago, I used to still work in the hospital in Pentonville prison, and I can tell you, I never got through a shift without them stealing each other's cigarettes and then whining about it. And how often do you see criminal enterprises that fall apart? But they all try to rip each other off.
Why were they whining about it?
But we love the idea.
But why were they whining about it? You see, they stole each other. I mean, Hume doesn't mean that they won't steal off each other. It means that they will still adhere. I mean, they don't adhere to it. Obviously, they're criminals. They haven't adhered to it. They don't adhere to it on principle. But basically, when they stole, they steal, say, £500 from the bank, and one of them runs off with the whole of the £5,000. They say, "That rat's stolen that money off us. We've earned it by stealing it off the bank." See, in other words, he's not saying they won't cheat each other. He's saying that they will still basically uphold the same sort of morals, although they won't. They'll cheat and so on as much as they can, but they'll be basically thinking that if money's been stolen off them, even though they've stolen it off someone else, it's rightfully theirs. In other words, they'll make property claims, and that's what he means by honour amongst thieves. Yeah, I think he's right. Isn't that right? I mean, why would they be whining about it? You say they still whine about them stealing cigarettes off
them. Because they're totally self-centred and they're
wrong. Yes, but also because they think it's wrong that they've been stolen off.
If only for the sake of a pun, I must say that private property does need defence. Defence.
Oh yes, it does. Yes, defence makes good neighbours.
That's right. But that aside, and the groans, we know the influence of Hume on Adam Smith, but of course there was stuff in Hume already and those before him, such that he could see that it's a great advantage to anybody, even the landless, that land is already privately owned massively.
Yes.
All sorts of things that are privately owned and run in an attempt to avoid losses and gain profits. The idea that it's to your disadvantage. No, you can be utterly landless, as people were when they arrived in America as immigrants. They knew they were just going to have to work and maybe save a bit and whatever, but it wasn't to their disadvantage that the land was there.
That's right.
Now, occasionally some of them might say, I'm going where the land is free, because some of the new states, you just turn up, you can have a land rush.
Yes, that's a land rush.
Yeah, land rush. You just got there, and you could stake a claim and have it. But then what did you do? You had to live in a sod hole in the ground for a few years and several winters, and yes, it was hard. It was hard going, but they thought, oh, we're getting something free, which in a sense they were, though it was very costly.
Yes.
If not in money terms. But, so the point is, it is a great advantage that the world is divided up into private property.
Oh yes.
Let alone the argument about,
yes, my friend, my old debating partner, John Hartley, pointed out to me when I was 15, because I was thinking of, when I was 15, there was a lot of advertisements about emigrating to Australia, where there's plenty of land and so on. Pardon?
£10 bonds.
Yes, that's right, yeah. I would have become one of them. But he pointed out, in Birmingham, Australia is primitive in relation to Birmingham. You've got all the modern facilities and so on here. They all need to be built in Australia. And he turned, he turned it on its head, and I thought that was quite insightful of him. He taught me that. I didn't go to Australia, as you know. But well, I might have gone and come back, but I didn't. He put me against it.
Lady here?
This is going to sound like a weird question, but why do we have the right to own land?
Well, because it's of social utility. That's Hume's answer. You see, it helps everyone in society, wherever they're stationed in society, to have rules of private property. Private property is a social benefit, a social boon. Now, of course, this would strike someone like Winstanley, who put the death sentence on private property, as being bizarre, but Winstanley didn't think enough. He didn't think enough about it. He didn't give enough consideration to private property. And Marxist ideas or socialist ideas seem flashy and commonsensical and so on, but when you think out the ramifications of them, they are actually antisocial. I mean, they might not be as antisocial as Hume thought. Hume thought they were fanatical and that it lead to people causing misery. In other words, he did think that they were, in terms of the talk, more Leninist than Marxist. These communist things, whereas I tend to think that there's not much communist about the Bolsheviks. That's what I tend to think. But then I'm prejudiced against them.
Surely the current situation has gone past a point where ownership is beneficial, because we've now got a point where land is an accommodation and housing has just is being totally used as a way of making money, and people who have money make money, and you've got a situation now where normal working people can't afford to live in our big cities. We not only get ripped off by landlords, but even if someone does scrape together enough to buy a modest flat now, they'll often end up being screwed over by leaseholds because people invent more and more ways to capitalise on owning a bit of property. I mean, you're saying private property, this is my shirt, yeah, nobody disputes that. Your clothing, your personal possessions of your house, that is private property that everyone should have access to, should understand. But this idea of a handful of people owning the ground beneath our feet and using it to make massive profits, and that leaves other people not able to get by.
Well, then I don't think they're making massive. You see, the profit has got a very bad press. I mean, Hume didn't talk about profit, but profit has got a very bad press. But profit actually is the hallmark of social utility, because profit is made through serving others. If you have two firms going in for entrepreneurship, that is guessing what people want to buy. Hang on a bit. Let me complete my reply.
People buy them, don't even live on them, sell them on for a couple of years. What use is that to anyone else? That is pure speculation, and it's damaging our country.
No, you're.
I think David would explain that it's being held back for a better use.
It needs to be freed up. Private property needs to be freed up. So it functions on the market. Presently, you've got government regulating it, stopping it from being as fluid as it would be. It isn't as fluid as it was even in Hume's day.
The market leads to rich Chinese. I read somewhere just at the weekend.
Chinese used to be poor.
Built in I think Manchester. 70% of the flats have been sold to Chinese people who see it as a way of making money.
Yeah, well, that's okay. Making money is okay.
It's not okay if you're someone in Manchester.
No, it is okay with some. No, you're not looking far enough. It is okay for someone in Manchester. Private property in the market serves the lowest group in society. No, well, of course you think so, but you see, you're not thinking deeply enough. You're not going into the ramifications of private property. You're looking on the face of it, and you're satisfied with the face of it. But presently you've got laws and regulations in this country preventing the building of new housing, which is green belt is what part of it, and you've got taxation schemes and so on, actually hobbling people in. If you could get rid, by a miracle you could get rid of the government for about 10 years, so there was no regulation at all, things would be far more equitable.
Yeah, but one thing that it's often occurred to me, and I speak as a rentier landlord, is overnight you can almost solve the problem of housing by saying that anybody with spare rooms in their houses
All that sort of-
can let them and won't be taxed on it. And millions and millions of rooms would suddenly become available. Rents would drop like a stone overnight. At the moment, of course, you're only allowed to receive up to about £7,000, not even that, before you have to declare it and pay tax on it. On it, just changing that one rule on its own would just free up the market incredibly and allow people to move around much more easily than they currently do.
Yeah, I mean, there's loads of. I mean, there's lots of regulation we could remove. See, private property is quite fluid. I mean, that is partly the reason why people fear it, is because it changes so rapidly. You know, it's very, very fluid. In that sense, it's not conservative, which is Roger Scruton, of course, to begin with, absolutely hated Keith, Joseph, and Thatcher, and he to put himself as a conservative, he put himself against Joseph and Thatcher because he realised they were too liberal. People fear the liberal outlook because it does change rapidly. You know, the market rapidly changes according to supply and demand, according to the uses that people make of it, and this can be quite rapid. It's not conservative at all. You know, not by any stretch of the imagination.
There's also the green objection that England, precious green and pleasant land, is being paved over. If it wasn't for regulations and green belts, there'd be bungalows from here to there. In other words, places for people to live in that cost less because the land is now available. This is a bad thing, is it? I cannot see it to be a bad thing, but no, people get the idea that
I think the opposite
without control
was being paved over because of the so-called green belt and the regulations.
That's very likely. Because you have to be there and not there. What there is just gets more and more used, and the building flats get smaller and smaller, and as is now happening.
Can you tell us more about the rental rooms? This is the biggest, to me, this housing problem is the biggest social problem in this country. This is such an interesting.
And on a related point, I mean, 100 years or so ago, you'd often have families renting an entire room. Workmen in London would rent a room between them, and they might have a dozen people sleeping in a room overnight, and that was normal. And of course, they had to pay very little comparatively as a result. But now, of course, that's completely illegal. If you let a room, you know, you very strict.
It's illegal to have a room where several people share.
No, hostels do that.
Hostels are a special case that have a special license, but yeah,
so they do it.
Yes,
okay.
but you can't in an ordinary household. In an ordinary household, you can't even have 3 floors with 5 people in who are from 2 different families without having 2 kitchens, even if you don't need a second kitchen. All kinds of regulations which, of course, the government always dresses up as protecting standards for people, but it protects standards by throwing them out on the street, because the alternative, they can't afford the good thing that the government wants them to have, so they end up literally sleeping on the street instead. I mean, there is no end of it. I've got, obviously, just build on the green belt, let people, in countries with slightly more liberal regimes, they have these sort of capsule hotels that you go in, and if you're coming to London and you're a young person, you're starting out, if you've got somewhere you can sleep, and it may look a bit like a coffin, but you get in there and you sleep at night, it's got a television in and whatever, and there's a separate shower, and they're all stacked up, and you may think, oh, what a terrible way to live, but yes, but you're starting out in London for the first time. It's a start. It costs you very little, you can afford to save, and eventually you can buy. That's not allowed over here.
Sorry, that's fine if you're 20 and you're starting out, but I've got colleagues in their 30s and 40s who are living like that. They're entitled to better, I think.
Well, they would get better if you completely deregulated the market. But
you said you're a landlord, because landlords get a lot of bad press.
We're a persecuted minority. Persecuted.
Well, I'm sure a lot of them deserve it. I mean, so you're an enlightened one, as opposed to people just making money for the fact they had the capital to do it and capitalise.
I would say the ones who get the most persecuted are the ones who are doing the most heroic were they?
Oh,
I mean,
maybe-
people,
yeah, no,
anybody
I
who's
just
stuffed
want to
their
know more
houses
about it.
full of people,
No, I just want to know
completely breaking all the laws, are bringing down the average rents.
Yeah, no, I just want to know more about it.
Yeah, including for the people.
Tell us
that-
more, because this is everybody's interested in this. And
Just a couple of points I'll make quickly about what Jan was saying. I mean, there's a lot of illegal stuff does go on. For example, hotbedding. I don't know if you all know what hotbedding is.
what?
Hotbedding?
That's when
You have a double, for example, a big double bed
Day and night shift
where
work
10
is
people are
swapping
sleeping in it. Then you've got a
Gilbert and
big double
Sullivan. Gilbert and Sullivan wrote a comedy opera about it, Box and Cox.
Funnily enough, it was only Sullivan. It wasn't yet.
Oh,
Gilbert.
sorry,
Yeah.
Box and Cox and Sullivan. Yes,
Sullivan and another
and
chap.
they discover that
They
they're
were
sharing the
Yeah,
same
but
room.
actually, on your point about the cubicles, I don't see what's wrong with that. If you've got people who want to go to, say, central London,
Yeah.
I don't see what's wrong with that, rather than them sleeping outside, just to be...
Well, I mean, it's. I'll tell you what. I mean, if it happens in the property you're living in, believe me, it would be very nice because you wouldn't like it. But just to come back to what we were saying earlier as well about profit and profit's a good thing for private property. What you were saying. I mean,
Profit is made, as I said earlier on. Let me remind you what I said. Profit is made by serving other people.
right.
Yeah, hopefully,
So Philippines are
hopefully,
being
it's not,
profiteering.
no,
Come on.
it's
Well,
made
well,
by,
well,
it's not just made by
Let
certain
me
people,
speak.
that's
Yeah, let me
false.
speak.
No, it's not false.
Just a second. The point I was going to make is this: if you have a company, for example, let's call it Thames Water, it's owned, let's say, by Australians, shareholders.
They are humans, you know.
Now, if they make huge profits, but that profit doesn't go to the community where it's made in, it goes to the other side of the world. How can that possibly benefit the people who are using it? And for example, if you have a system there...
How can it not benefit the people who are using it?
I'll tell you how.
Yes.
I'll tell you how.
That's why they bought the water.
Right, this is how it's
Benefits
more
them.
benefit. Because in London, where you haven't got sewage and the ordinary rainwater separate, as you have in most cities. When they are separate, they're not separate in London. But when you have a heavy rainfall and the sewage goes into the rivers, polluting all the rivers, for example, you would expect the shareholders, the people making a profit, to pay to have, to separate these two things. So if you have a thunderstorm, for example, it's not going to run off into the river.
Well,
But why would they do that when they're living on the other side of the
No, first of all, we've got to sort out profit, right? I mean, Dominic and you seem to know nothing about profit, except that you've read in the Daily Mirror or somewhere else that it's antisocial.
I know,
As indeed this lady here has. But let me explain profit. Profit is the fruits of entrepreneurial competition. So when you have something like Thames Water, which has no competition, profit in the normal sense of the word doesn't get much of a look in there. Profit is from entrepreneurial competition where certain numbers of firms guess what will sell or what the people want, and in order to gain the profit, they compete against the other firms, and the profit is zero sum, by the by. Most of the market is positive sum.
It's a
But
perfect market already to start talking
no, we're not talking about a perfect market. I mean, I hate the word perfect. No, we're not talking about. A lot of libertarians actually think that there is a conspiracy in the people who write textbooks of economics, and they think the conspiracy is called perfect competition. They think it is propaganda against liberalism, and they can be excused. They can be excused for thinking that, but I don't think they're right. However, I'm not talking about perfect competition. I'm talking about competition, which is never perfect. I'm talking about sources of income. I'm talking about the market where most transactions are positive sum, that is, gains on both sides. But hang on a bit. But there is an exception to this, and that is profit. Profit is where you don't have gains on both sides. One firm gains at the expense of another firm. The other firm makes losses. Now, this is where people are patronised by the consumers or the customers, better the customers, and the profit comes from the patronage of customers. That's profit. Now, when you get into single suppliers, what they call natural monopolies or monopolies, you don't get profit. Although some textbooks say you get supernormal profit. But in actual fact, it's not technically profit. You don't get the negative sum gain. You get what they might call economic rent. You get something quite different from profit. Now, profit itself, as I've just explained it, being the fruits of competition, is in fact only earned through serving the public. That's the hallmark of public service. I mean, the National Health Service has no hallmark. The National Health Service. The National Health Service. The National Health Service.
Shut up!
This would have been done.
Shut up!
This is what Hume.
I am going to ask a bloody question.
When the Thatcherites privatised all the nationalised industries, they claimed competition would give everyone a cheaper
State
situation.
monopolies are not an
They
example of
haven't.
private.
We're getting ripped off more than ever.
Yes.
I've forgotten what my point was now, you distracted.
Yeah, but you're confused about privatisation as well.
No, you're wrong.
No, I'm not wrong. But anyhow,
You're
you...
just making up your definitions of this.
Wait a
No,
minute.
I'm not making up my definitions of this.
Standard in the literature of economics.
It goes back to Hume.
Yeah, but this isn't the way the word is used.
Oh, no.
It's not the way...
People don't understand.
People just say monopoly.
I know what he's saying,
Yes,
but it
it does.
doesn't apply to what the lady here is talking about.
Some people think
The lady there isn't talking about profit, she's talking about privatisation.
No, I'm saying those
And she doesn't mean privatisation.
People who bought those firms made a massive profit and have done more public goods and
yes.
services.
Well, that's just ladylike propaganda.
Silence. I've stood up. Right. On a point of fact, because the water of the Thames became so polluted, guess what entrepreneurs did? They built reservoirs further up the Thames, further up the Lee, and advertised their pure waters and delivered it, competing. There might be one water company down one street and one down the next street. It did happen, it could happen. Indeed, that's why Dr. Snow over
Yes.
up there, and his famous pump, or rather he took away the pump handle.
Yes.
This is near Oxford Street. Regent Street, Oxford Street.
Silver?
Wait a minute. It was found out that it was cholera, I think it's a waterborne
Yes.
one.
Yeah.
That one street had cholera and the other street did not have cholera. And what did he do? Well, he thought, well, no, obviously the water must be different, and he found it was different. And on a sad note, I should say, there was an old lady and her daughter went up to live at Highgate. And she so loved the water where she used to live that she had some sent up to her. And they both died of cholera. And her local water was not as tasty, apparently, but not as lethal. Anyway, now we're all calmed down a bit. Any further interesting points?
Yeah, that in itself is erroneous. You're assimilating now, say, profit to Darwinian sort of evolution.
Darwinian evolution comes from, oddly enough, David Hume. Well,
That's a version of
no, look. The modern theory of evolution. I mean,
look, can I finish the sentence? There's more extreme versions of what you two have both been saying.
there's a lot of fact talk about Darwinism.
Derek
Terrible.
Parfit's book,
How
pointed
was
this
that-
out to. Derek Parfit's book, Reason and Person, said you can do good by doing extreme harm. Things like the Holocaust, for example, some good has come out of that. But does that mean we've got to go through all the harm? And that's the problem with what's going on with our housing
I don't
market.
think it matters.
Maybe we will sort it out and we'll evolve more sophisticated ways to house our descendants,
Yeah, you completely
our young
nonsense.
people. But in the meantime, we're dealing with a horrible situation.
David
You
Harvey.
can't justify it.
I don't think, on balance,
David
Well,
Harvey.
answer what I said. I don't think you think on balance. It
I
would
do
be a
have to
good
ask what
summary.
good
If
came
you
out
want
of
me
the
to keep...
Holocaust, I'm sorry, but...
well, I don't think we are. But
No,
You take my point.
yeah, point is a silly one. Very silly one, and yeah, it is a silly one. It's a social Darwinist one, which gets Darwin completely wrong. But let's have a look at
Forget
the.
about that. That's just a marker for what I'm saying. You can always produce
No,
good from
you
doing
raised
harm,
it.
but do we want the harm?
You can produce good from doing harm.
Next good.
I can't imagine how you can produce good from doing harm.
Possible.
Harm always produces good. When Faust meets the devil, Faust says, "Who are you?" The devil
Faust,
says,
Goethe,
"I am
romance."
that- You know the line, "I am that which wishes harm, which always does good." Now,
No, that's
what
wrong.
This lady's talking
Harm
about,
doesn't always do good.
I'd like to use
Is this a
statement about
question
them
or a comment from the floor?
both.
No, I'd rather have a question.
I'm
I'm
sure
sure one.
Finishing, you've got
Could you
sure
Comments
you
are allowed
want.
as long as they finish at some point and then the reply.
Could you put a rising inflection at some point? Is it not the case?
Okay,
No, I lived in New Zealand and Australia. I haven't picked up that habit.
You've got some there to respond to, don't you?
Well, I wanted to have a look at. the origin.
I want this lady's.
I wanted to have a look at the origin of modern evolution. It goes through Hume. There was any numbers of theories of evolution in ancient Greece, and theories of evolution at the end of the 18th century were quite common. In fact, Erasmus Darwin rejected the theory of natural selection because it didn't favour progress. Exactly what someone like Richard Dawkins would think was a mistake. But it wasn't a mistake. He did it deliberately because he couldn't tolerate the theory of natural selection not favouring progress, and that was Darwin's grandfather. Now, it so happened that there was a man called Joseph Butler who said Hobbes and Descartes make the distinction between animals and humans too vast. Animals are far more like humans, and humans are in fact animals of the type. Now, Butler influenced David Hume. David Hume influenced Thomas Malthus. Thomas Malthus was the one person who Darwin read to get his theory of natural selection, and the other person who read it was the later chap Russell, Alfred Russell Wallace. Alfred Russell Wallace. He also read Malthus. Both of them got from economics, from competition in economics, the theory of natural selection. Now, I just want to continue with the history of this onto that wretched social Darwinism, because it is a travesty, because Darwin was an individualist. The theory of evolution was individualism. The people who I've mentioned, Hume, Butler and so on, all individualists. But Benjamin Kidd, Benjamin Kidd, with his social Darwinism, started praising nations and the wars of various nations. This was completely alien to Darwinism, as is group selection. Yet, if I go on Wikipedia and the social Darwinist thing on Wikipedia, I will get Benjamin Kidd, not Darwin.
Yeah, David, you're missing the point. Social Darwinism has a common linguistic meaning in this society. Wherever you hold
Which has
it
nothing to
from,
do with
or
Darwin.
Wherever it came from, I never said it did. It's a linguistic term which means something, and that's what you were adverting to. Now, let's get back to the original question. Can you justify good in the future by doing harm now?
I can't justify anything.
With this
There is no justification.
Can I ask one question? And it is a question.
Yeah.
And it's quite, you might think it's quite simplistic. I'm not going to quote any of this, but do you not think you have to differentiate between the profit that comes as a result of hard work, ingenuity and effort, and profit that comes as a result of having a bit of money, inheriting a bit of money, owning a bit of property?
Just gaining
And
the
we have
system.
reached a point where accumulation is led us to a point where the latter type is in.
Profit isn't necessarily a good means of communication. I mean, profit has got a bad press, and by a bad press I mean the people who write about profit in the press virtually get nothing right about it.
I don't think that's
What? Just answer the bloody question.
I'm answering the question. The question is
No, don't redefine that term.
It is-
It's clear.
it's clearly stupid and ignorant.
You see what he's saying to you?
I don't think you're answering the question.
No, he's not explaining.
I'm explaining what profit is. You don't seem to know.
It's usually more.
It's nothing to do with privatisation. It's nothing to do with capital
What
accumulation.
you're saying, other than that, man,
It's to do with returns to entrepreneurship. It's like wages, rent. There's wages, rent, and profit, and what's the other thing? Interest. They're the four things. These are the four things. We're explaining.
That's the question. Answer the
Yes,
question.
the question is bloody stupid. And I'm explaining why the question is
Well, you say
stupid.
the question's unacceptable, is it?
No,
I think it's.
Sir Harris, what does Sir
Carry on
Harris
with
say?
the
Because that
test.
shocked me.
Sam Harris says we ought to kill people for their beliefs.
Did he?
Yeah.
Alright, that comes as a shock to me. I need to look that up. I've not heard that.
And it comes as a shock to me when I read it in his book.
Which book?
The end of...
I'm not sure he advocated.
he does advocate it, he repeats it in his other books. But the book I read was his first one. It's the end of... The end of religion, is it? Or the end of...
Yeah.
I forget the title. But anyway, it's his first book, the first book he published. Yeah, he advocates killing people